So the first topic is I asked ex-Meta engineer how to get hired.
You were our engineer at Meta, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I worked at Meta, and yeah, it was a great time. So if you're wondering pretty much how to get hired, I mean, that's a topic big on it of itself. So do you want me to answer that like vaguely, or do you want to go like over the hiring process?
What did you work on at Meta?
Yeah, so that's at Meta, I worked on the infrastructure side of things. So Meta is a huge company. It serves billions and billions of people. You could say potentially even half of the world. So with that, you need a very, very strong system. You need a strong backend. You need multiple data centers. You need like a huge infrastructure. And within that infrastructure, you have a lot of services and you have a lot of systems that always need to be up and running. So that was my job in particular, was working in the infrastructure side where we handle the building. And again, Meta has so many applications, and the code base, as I mentioned earlier, like it's huge. So imagine you have this whole huge code base trying to build, multiple applications out of this. It's really, really hard. And what makes it really hard is when you have millions of lines of code and you have thousands of engineers constantly pushing up code. How do we, make sure all the applications that we build correctly sync and deploy, to app stores correctly, right? And they need to be efficient, and it's a lot of work that goes into that. So that was my focus going there. And the teams around me were all, focused on that infrastructure.
めちゃめちゃでかいコードを触ることになったと思うんですけど、どうやって解決したんで、どうやって慣れたり、どうやってできるようになったりしたんですか？
Yeah. So at the beginning, all engineers, this is common in many major companies, but you get like a time to onboard to the code base. So you get about potentially a month, 2 months. Some companies is 3 months, where you solely focus on onboarding to the new, to the code base and to the system, to the infrastructure, right? So within those 3 months, or 2 months, in my case, in Meta's case, it's about a month that you get to onboard, and then you move on to like your team. Yeah, that's when you touch everything. You try to deploy like some little tiny stuffs. You contact your manager, and then you say, hey, I want to try touching this. I want to tackle this task, or I'm curious about this. And then you just let it go. And in the case of Meta, it's actually really amazing. Meta gives their employees the freedom to choose what kind of department or team they kind of want to join or they're interested in during this onboarding period. So it's not like you're hired to create like VR and you stick to VR, or you're hired to just do infrastructure. No, you come in. If you come in as a general engineer, you come in and then you look at the system, you look at the services that you have, and then you kind of get to choose a little bit what interests you so much. So to answer your question, it is a huge code base. However, Meta's code base. So in a way, regardless of what team you go, if you're working like as a backend engineer, for example, you're gonna, for the most part, use the same technology and tools.
これはなんか1ヶ月でできるようになるもんなんですか？オンボーディングの。
So yes and no, it depends. Well, first of all, when you come to Meta, they do like a box. You have to pass like a lot of interviews. You have to check, hey, is this person history good? Are they able to, do they know their stuff, right? So they trusted you once you come in that, you're able to onboard to their new systems. And the overall gist, the overall workflow of all the systems, yes, you're going to be able to, get in there and, code and deploy stuff within like a month. It's enough time to do that. However, for specific teams and specific code bases, again, you have a large code bases and a lot of services and systems within that creates that huge system, right? You go on to work with just one of those systems, right? Now, getting there and actually diving deep into that individual code system, that's where you're going to need more than time. So by that time, the first month is just to build up a foundation. And then afterwards, you go in there to, whatever team you choose to actually, use that foundation to, implement new features. And yeah, so that will take you a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. The next question, could you share like a typical day in the life of software engineer at Meta? What time did you start work, or what time did you finish to work?
Yeah. So first of all, this is Silicon Valley, and it is Meta, and they do prioritize company culture and life balance quite a lot. So with that said, For example, there really isn't like a specific time you should be at work or you want to work. Like, for example, you can start working at 8, get to the company at 8 a.m. You can get there at 9 a.m., 11 a.m. For the most part, like, it should be fine as long as you're able to work the same amount of hours. So let's just say if you're working 8 hours, let's just say you start at 10, then you're gonna potentially leave at 6, right? 6 and then maybe 7. So for the most part, getting there, it's free. You get to choose, which is a really nice perk. But at the same time, you're still working just as hard as you typically are. On my case, I try to stick to the 9 to 5 kind of schedule. And with an hour break in between. So typically I will get to work anywhere from 8:30 to maybe 10:30. And then from there, I mean, these are the offices that are huge. They're modern. I would say they're almost like a mini city in a way.
Yeah.
Right? So you go in there, you have individualized desks. On top of that, you do have your own computer, your own company computer, and that's where you have your code, your environment. And then internally, you also have everything. You have a lot of perks within the company. Like you have, there's breakfast, there's coffee, a lunch. So they can just, if they're hungry, you just go eat, and then you can just focus on the work. So from there on, eat breakfast, get a coffee, and then get to work for about 4 hours. And then afterwards, go get lunch. It's really amazing because every time they have different things in the cafeteria. And then afterwards, you go back to your task, maybe work another 4 hours. And then afterwards, you can even have dinner or just go home. So for the most part, life balance is really good at Meta, as long as you're able to work when you're supposed to work.
以前 X メタ X Google のエンジニアの人と喋った時に Google と比べた時に、メタの方がハードワーカー多いみたいなこと言ってたんですけど、ここら辺はどうですか？肌感覚として Google とメタ比べた時にいわゆるワークライフバランスみたいなところ。
It depends on what you want to focus on. I said earlier that you do have some people working 12 hours like coding really a lot, but then again you also have it depends on the teams too, but in general you have a system that's called like levels. So you have E4, E5, E6, E7, and so on. So there's different kinds of levels. And for the most part, if you're aiming for like a good work-life balance, you will probably stick to maybe E5. If you're just starting E4 and then you will go to E5 and that's it. If you really wanted life balance, you will stick to E5. And in this scenario, I will say Meta is one out of the GAFA companies is one of the best ones if you want a good work-life balance. However, if you're trying to aim for more money and you're trying to go even the next step, that's when it does, I agree. In Meta, it could be pretty hard. Google might be, from what I heard as well, Google in general might be, for the most part, a little bit harder than Meta in terms of life balance. But when you're going to the upper levels, Meta, it's pretty rough. You have a lot of responsibility. You have a lot of impact you do need to accomplish to really get to those high levels, like E6, E7, E8. But at the same time, if you're going for these levels, you're going to have less life balance, but you will be making a lot more money, especially in stocks, right? In stocks, you're looking at, if you're like an E7, E8 level, you're looking at $500,000 extra, like $1 million if you really are have a lot of responsibility in your hand. But of course, your life balance, you can probably say goodbye to it.
What is the Meta interview process like? Is there a lot of coding interview session?
First is you send out your resume. So after they check your resume and you pass, then you go on to take some coding tests. And then coding tests, they're kind of like typical, you will find a code. It's similar to those, depending on the difficulty. If it's a really hard problem, that's all you're going to do for an hour. If it's more simple problems, you're going to maybe solve 3 of them and, maybe take 20 minutes each. Now, after you pass those and everything's good, then you go on to like the actual interview. So they saw your resume and your coding, both look good. Then you go on to a set of interviews. Now, these are 4 interviews. So you have 2 coding interviews where you just code. You have another interview where you go on system or designing software. And then the other 2, the coding interviews are just straight out, can you code or not? And you tell them, hey, I'm thinking of this. I'm going to solve it this way. I'm going to use this data structure and whatnot. So they kind of like they take a look at how you think through these coding interviews. And then the last one, and I actually think it's a very important one, is actually a personality interview. So this is where, they assess you, they talk to you. It's kind of like you with either a manager or another engineer, and you check whether you're a good fit for the company, like personality wise and like culture wise, like culturally, do you fit to the company culture or not? And now after this, all the people who you interview, they'll gather and they'll do a process and they'll finalize the results. Hey, I think, you're a good fit to join the company or not.
Regardless entry level, everyone have to do design system. Like in Japan, maybe senior or more position do a lot of our system designing interview, but some junior position don't have to do system designing. What about Meta?
That question I would say varies from team to team, level of entry too, right? But at the same time, everybody has some form of systems design or software design. But again, if you're low level, you're probably not going to be asked, hey, like, are you looking into using Memcache or Redis to save our company bandwidth by XYZ, right? It might be a little bit different than that. You might be asked, like, if we give you Java and Spring Boot, how will you design this translation web API kind of a question? So, and all of these questions come from the job description of the part you're applying to. But if I apply as a systems or systems engineer, then might be asked more infrastructure or maybe like Linux or server, maybe like a low level question. If I apply for front end or Android, I might be asked like about those, like how to use React or how will I connect that with GraphQL. But it does depend. It depends by your title and the level.
Thank you. The next is what key skills or experience do you think for get job at Meta?
First of all, everybody is almost expected to have a good foundation, like a good computer science foundation, right? Your data structures, algorithms, programming, OOP, how database works. So these are core infrastructures. After you have those fundamentals, the next thing is very specific to what you're going to do. More than anything, I would say is experience. If you have experience and you can demonstrate your experience, that's huge. Another thing you can demonstrate is experience things that are not necessarily technical. An example of this is knowing what kind of implementation will have the most impact for users. Right? Or if you implemented something, how can you save the company costs, like server costs, like bandwidth, or whatever? Can your the implementation you've done in the past was able to have this much impact? After the fundamentals, you're looking at two things: your experience with certain tech stacks, and how you're able to bring impact with your skill sets, right? How can I use it to create impact? Like there's different cases, right? You could be like a fast worker and work fast and implement everything smoothly. Or you could also be a person that knows when to code something the quick way and when to do it the hard way. So you have the pros and cons and you're able to decipher them and you're able to know, hey, this one's going to be more efficient for us. Let's go and implement it this way, right? And on top of that is if you're doing any kind of management or tech lead stuff, then you're expected to know the pros and cons and the ideas as well, right? So you have the skill sets to, come up with implementation ideas, like how to go about solving XYZ or the business itself, right? So it could depend. Two things is, again, experience with the tech stack and then how you're able to make impact for a company as an engineer.
それはなんか例えば大規模開発経験してたら有利とかってあったりするんですか？
Yeah, of course. Not necessarily you have to come from a background of building scalable systems. But if you did, then that's perfect for Meta because their onboarding cost is going to be less. You already know how everything works. And that's like almost like the default preference. So the default preference is, yes, you have some experience working with the systems. But if you don't, then you're going to have to prove your skill set as an engineer, and on top of that, how you're able to, make impact. Like, why are you so good for the company? Because again, the companies, they're there to kind of make profit, and you as an engineer, right, you need to kind of bring value to the company. So you need to check how you can bring value to a company. If you worked at a startup and it was you mainly building a huge project, and that project became successful and made the company money, that's perfect. You can talk to that at Meta, right? In many of the interviews, we're able to bring impact out. That impact as a software engineer matters a lot, actually, especially for this huge scale companies, is the impact, how you brought impact, what kind of impact you brought before, what kind of experience you have, bringing impact. It's very, very important.
Kind of impact is 評価されやすい。利益めっちゃ上げた。スピードめっちゃ上げた。速度改善したとか、なんか、what kind of impact?
All of those are good examples of impact. All of those. I wouldn't say, I mean, if I were to choose one, of course, it would be money in two ways, right? You either made the company a lot of money or you saved the company a lot of money. That's like easiest impact you can probably build to, hey, I created this new product, I created this new app, and the revenue of the company grew by like 200,000 within 3 months. Right? That's like some simple impact. But on top of that, actually, as an engineer, it's almost like a skill set, especially in Meta. And anytime you do a project, Meta is a very data-centric company, which means that whenever you're going to create a new thing and you're going to create like a new product or new feature, new implementation, you should have some metrics that you're going to track, you're going to like evaluate through the course of a period, like 3 months or whatnot. So these metrics are the impact, like the impact you bring within a project, right? So if you can demonstrate that in your previous companies, these are the impacts you kept track of and you were able to improve. Now, the size of that impact will matter the most and will be evaluated the most. And you need to like communicate how much impact and what kind of value of an impact you were able to have. Quick example you said is speed. If you were to optimize, it saved the user experience 10 seconds, like in loading. That's huge when you have, like, let's just say 10,000 users visiting a site, like 10,000 times 10 seconds, right? It's the actual value, but besides that, the experience itself a user will have, my tip will just be that impact comes in many different ways. For example, you can have impact by performance, or you can have performance by having some kind of a reliability issue solved. Or for example, if the past 3 years, the company had 5 crashes, and these 5 crashes cost the company $50,000 per crash. Now you came in here, you built up the reliability, and the next 2 years, you had only 1 crash. That's huge impact, right? Even though there was no crash, you saved the company of potentially 4 crashes that will have cost, a lot of money to fix. Right? This kind of impact doesn't get looked at because it's like preventative. However, if you're like the one that does get viewed, ironically, is like a crash happens, an engineer comes in there and fixes the issue. That gets like its visible impact and everybody's like clapping and saying, yeah, right? But the one who really should be clapped at is the person who prevented those 5 crashes from happening in the first place. So this is just an example where like impact can come in different kind of scenarios.
インタビューにちょっと話戻ると、候補者はどうやって準備すればいいんですか？メタのインタビューに対して。
It depends how much time you have. Let's just put it that way. If you have maybe like 2 weeks, practice your coding. Maybe make sure that you choose the best language that you can actually think in and code, with your eyes closed even. Choose that and then just practice, get that muscle memory going. So when the actual interview comes, you'll be good and you'll be set. Just building that muscle memory, like solving problems, is going to be huge. And then again, you can use different services for that. You have recursion, like LeetCode, you have AdCoder. So building that muscle memory is good. Now, when it comes to the personality one, that really relies on your past experience and your soft skills. I would say at least talk. My best recommendation is to talk with other engineers about engineering stuff, right? Or just talk about engineering and business. If you're able to just talk with other engineers, either engineer or a manager, like regularly, that would be good practice. So you can build, that kind of like that speaking skills for the interview. Now, for the systems design question or the software design, it depends on your level or what you're doing. This is the one where it does come from experience, that you just kind of need experience building all this stuff and you just know how it works because you have 4 years of experience. Like, let's just say you're a front engineer working on React. When you get a React question, you just be able to answer it because you have 4 years of experience, right? You use it on a daily basis. The best thing you can do is reflect. You need to take a moment to reflect on all the stuff you worked up until now, how you implement it, and just note down some of the most important lessons you learned to kind of like refreshen your memory about what you're doing. For example, let's go back to React. When you first implemented the feature, at the beginning required a lot of the foundation of the building blocks. And then, hey, you finish that and then you just keep on adding new features on features on top of it. Well, what ends up happening is that you kind of forget what happened when you first build up the initial building blocks. So you may need to like refresh on those building blocks or whatever tech stack you're using in preparation. Now, if you're doing something more where it's let's just say a scalable systems, you're going into infrastructure and you're doing scalable systems and whatnot, then it goes back to that. Hopefully you do have experience with scalable systems by this point. If you don't, then it's a good idea to learn about some level of scalable systems. Like understanding what's the difference vertical scaling, why that doesn't work versus horizontal scaling, why you need to add more servers instead of adding more hardware. Another thing is what would be the difference between using a relational database versus no SQL database, or another one could be like, what about deployment CI/CD? Have you done your own CI/CD deployment scripts? And then on top of that, your data structures, because again, for this, in some scenarios, it will matter. You're going to have to do some level of math in this area, for example, to calculate, to crunch up the numbers. It really depends. If you have 2 weeks, it's best to work on coding, practicing your coding and building muscle. If you have more than time for that, let's just say you're looking to get this job like half a year from now, you have a lot more time. So it's good to, if you're going on a scalable system, you've never done a scalable system, hey, go read some books on this.
You learn from books about scalable?
From all sources, online, if looking from experiences, from coworkers, textbooks, the stuff I learned in college. However, I will do a memo note is a lot of the stuff you learn like in your, let's just say computer science in school, you at the moment, you don't realize how important they are until you start working in the real world with a project that requires this knowledge. Like a basic simple one is database. You're learning SQL because your curriculum, how do you learn databases in SQL? You don't understand the importance of SQL until you enter a company and now you need to calculate an aggregate of all users on this particular, group by and work clause. So you can get this very specific metric importance until the time comes. Yeah, same with building apps too is the same case. It's until it's already too late.
特にスケーラビリティ、初めそれこそ本から学ぶとかもありかもしれない。多分これとか結構海外でも読まれてるような気がする。あれ全然映れへん。全然映れへんな。データ思考アプリケーションデザイン。
This is one of those books that I recommend a lot of people. I recommend to a lot of people, especially if you're going to a scalable company, a company that has a huge backend, has a backend engineer. This is one of those books that you're going to need. Of course, before you read this book, you do need some kind of fundamentals. You need some level of computer science knowledge. And that's assumed after you have that, the next level up is to do this one. And funny enough, if you go work at Meta, I had this happen too many times where we would just reference this book actually when we're fighting or we're saying, hey, this idea is better than this idea. We will actually reference the source and reference this book, for example, in those conversations. Fights or conversations and say, this is why it's reason, because look, if we scale it this way, it's going to be better, blah, blah, blah.
だからこう働いてからも実際辞書的に使うというか、これどうやったっけみたいな使えるってことですね。
Yes. And on Meta, again, Meta is big companies GAFA. This kind of knowledge that almost doesn't make sense or you don't need it at all in many other different companies like a startup, it matters on Meta, right?
実際給料高いと思うんですけど、どれぐらい高いんですか、メタって。
It's quite a lot actually. Okay, so let me explain the salary. So you get a base salary and then you get stock grants. Each stock sells for a lot and then you can make a lot of money, especially if the company gains value, you're going to be making a lot more money. And then the last one is your bonus. These are the three that make up your salary. This was a few years back. The base salary was $165,000. That would be your base. And then now it probably increased a little bit. It's roughly $180K now. And then on top of that, you get stocks. And then stocks, it varies. Back then, it was, I would say like around $70,000. With that said, your total comp with stocks will be somewhere around anywhere from 220 to 240, sometimes 250. And that does depend on when you sell or if you even decide to sell. And this is what ended up happening a few years back is that let's just say you got $60,000 in stocks. Market actually crashed in 2021, 2022 for Meta in particular. It was reduced by half of its value, meaning that your your 60,000 in extra stock is now worth 30,000. Maybe at that point in time, I was maybe making closer to 200,000. This will happen after I left the company. Next year, Meta grew a lot, like 5 times. So let's just say if originally you got to 60 and then it went down to 30, well, now that 30K is worth 150,000 after it increased. So just because of these, in the recent market, price will fluctuate a lot depending on the market, but your base is still the same regardless. So yeah, so to answer your question, back then when the stock crashed 200K, now some engineers who were lucky at E4 were able to make a lot of money, more like $400,000 in 1 year. Of course, next year, the stock is going to go back to 60K per year, and then it will get reevaluated. And then they're going to have to wait or like hope the value of the company increases again. So it's a little bit, you can't just rely on your stock, to determine how much you're going to make. But if the company does good, they really reward engineers. And this incentivizes engineers to make the company successful, because if they're successful, stock goes up and their money also goes up. Either way, it's a little bit of gambling because you can't determine. But in my case, I just truly believed in Meta. You know what? I'm just gonna stay invested in Meta.
まあでも長い目で見ればほぼ伸びるだろうっていう感じですもんね。じゃあ E4 はそれぐらいのあれだったと思うんですけど、E5、E6 どれぐらい上がるんですか？
So E5 will be your senior position, and this is where the base. Earlier I said 180K-ish, 185K-ish for base. The base actually doesn't increase that much. It might increase $40,000 or so. But your stock that you're granted increases a lot. I'm not too sure of the recent numbers, but it should be double. You get double the stocks than your E4 position. So you're looking at making $300,000 per year and more. Now, if you came into the company before it increased, it could be even $500,000. So it just depends when you joined the company. Did you join before skyrocketing price? If so, you made like $500,000, maybe even more than $500,000. However, if you joined after the boost, after Meta increase in price, then you're making maybe 320-ish, around that ballpark, which is a lot of money. Like in the States, you're making as much as doctors, right?
E6 はどうですか？
Yeah, and then E6 is more like you're leading a team, you're doing tech lead. Yeah, you're doing kind of like extra work for the company and you're leading some kind of team. So that will be your E6 value. And your E6 value, so your base salary also doesn't increase that much. It's the same as E4, E5, E6, maybe like a boost of 40K. But again, your stocks also increase. So before you were making like 300K, thanks to the stocks, you're going to make $400,000. And then again, depending if you made it before, that 400,000 could be more than $500,000, like 700, like almost $1 million, $700,000. I seen some E6 be around the ballpark of $700,000. Of course, after the increase, you're looking more like in today's value, maybe 400,000 will be a more realistic $500,000 would be something in E6 you can expect as an E6. And then after the E6 level where you're going to E7, E8, anybody in the company can go from E4, E5, E6. E6 is also realistic for anybody within the company. However, E7 requires some kind of very specific level of responsibility or impact that will get you to that level. So not everybody can just become an E7, even if you work there through your whole career. Like it's very hard. But if you do make it, I mean, on top of the responsibility you're gonna have, you're looking at like $1 million in salary, with stocks, bonus, everything, in income. Generally, if you're going to E4 to E5, it will probably take you 3-4 years to get to that position. If you're going to E5 to E6, that could also depends on your opportunities and how proactive you are. And also some people actually just stay at E5 for their whole careers. So their whole time at Meta, because it offers a good amount of life balance. But for those that go to E6 and lead teams, they go on to either create a new product within internally or, work with their managers to boost their skill ups and, get more responsibility. And that's how they end up like leading a team or leading a project and building the designs, new implementation. That one actually does depend. It could be 2 years if you're really focused. Sometimes it could be a little bit more. And now E6 to E7, that one's the undetermined one where like you have to be very special or do something very special for you to get to that position.
何年やっても行かれへんっていう人も全然おるっていう感じ。
Yes.
そこら辺さっき E5 で結構とどまる人もおるみたいな話だったと思うんですけど、なんかメタ聞いた噂によると特定のポジションで数年以上とどまっ ってたらなんかファイヤーされるって聞いたんですけど、ここら辺本当ですか？
So if you're an E4, earlier I said it's going to take you 4 years. That's the expectation. So you're expected to go from E4 to E5. And if you do not go from E4 to E5, you did not reach the E5 senior level, then that's bad. You might get fired. Most likely, it's more like you're going to talk with your manager and you're going to see how can we get you to the E5 level. And if it doesn't work, potentially it is. Back then, it used to be better because the market for engineers was much better. But now they're trying to be more lean. So it's more rough. So yes, if you stick to E4, probably especially now, it's not good. Over 4 years. Now for E5 to E6, it's more gray. It's a more gray area because E5 is kind of like your senior level. And there's also the case where simply a lot of people just simply switch jobs by the time they're going to go from E5 to E6. But generally, I don't think you will get fired if you cannot move from a senior engineer to like a tech lead or something.
なるほど。E5 が一番ワークライフバランス的にも良さそうみたいな感じなんですね。普通のサラリーとバランス考えると。
So yes, it will. In today's money, I mean, you're getting almost close to $500,000, more like 400K range. So of course you do have to pay your taxes. Government does take a lot, but you're well set.
なるほど。
ちなみにジェフェリーさんはなんかどういうポジションやったとかって。
I entered as an E4. And again, the E4, I was on track to get into E5, but then again, that's when I left the Meta before going from E4 to E5. So it was getting towards the senior position.
そこでの、給料っていうのはさっき言ったようなレンジぐらいって感じですかね。
Yes, it's around that range.
めちゃめちゃ多いですね。なるほど。わかりました。大体給料こんな高い、めちゃめちゃ高いですというのは分かったんで、ただ、メタ辞める人めっちゃ多いと思うんですよね。実際、どうですか？
It depends how you view it. It might also be like a culture of America where people just switch jobs every 4 years or so. And, they have either more opportunities at a different company or it's going to be easier for them to go from E5 to E6 by simply changing companies instead, like going from Meta to Google. So there's those costs too. So in terms of why someone will quit, even though they're making a lot of money, it comes down to three things. One is better job opportunities, and two, entrepreneurship. They go on to build their own companies. Three is work-life balance, right? So that's the last one, where some people, it's a little bit too much. In a company, they can have maybe half the stress, make just enough to like live really, really good. And I'll tell you this, when you're in E5, going from an E5 to an E6, or let's just say E6 to an E7, I've seen a lot of people whose stress levels just went through the roof. And what you're making back in return, for some people, it does not really benefit you, right? Because you're still in that really wealthy, you're going from really wealthy to more really wealthy. But your life changes because now instead of having less stress, more life balance, having a good life balance, you now have all this responsibility and stress and making impact and having to make sure the stuff you're working on goes through. Yeah, that would be the last section. I've seen other people go from just a shift, going from Meta to Google or from like Meta to Netflix. I've seen the opposite where you go from Amazon to Meta and you have these companies kind of like stealing each other's talent. So that's something they do. There's rare cases though, and I've seen these too, where you will actually have especially some kind of like finance companies that will grab engineers from like Meta because they're working on something very specific. Their boost in salary for these particular people is huge. We're talking about you, let's just say you were making like 300K or 400K. Now with that switch, you're making close to over $1 million, like a year in salary on this very specialized thing this company needs. There's the reason.
なんか他はいます？スタートアップ、ビッグテック、企業、それ以外。
I talked about right here is all from people who left out of their own will. Like you decided to leave. You were not fired. You just decided to leave out of your own will. But yes, the other is fire, and that's a lot. If you don't perform well, you will be laid off. So the way it works is in these companies, you will have a performance check every half a year or yearly. And during these performance checks, managers will check, hey, are you performing on par or at least, doing your job? Are you doing it below? And they will evaluate how you're doing. Or alternative, there's some teams where company actually does not need the team anymore. And what will happen with the team is they can't really work or transfer to a different team skill-wise because they don't have the skill set. Those will potentially fire as well. Anytime Meta decides to do a big layoff, these big layoffs, and it's done, it did that back in 2022. It does that from time to time. There's plans on doing another one as of late as well too. Because Meta's trying to go more lean and be a lean company and just using the minimum resources to get the most output kind of a thing. So when those things get announced, actually it's even more brutal. Like before, like regularly you would just get performance reviews and you'll check and you will know that, hey, I've been doing bad for like a year. I'm probably going to get fired because I've been doing bad for a year. But when these layoffs happen, sometimes you don't even know that you're going to be fired because you've been performing like good. You've been doing okay. You've been doing great. Yeah, you're just going to get fired because business reasons. Again, mostly business reasons.
部署全部なくなるみたいな感じですもんね。サービスそもそもなくなる。それでパフォーマンス良くてもダメみたいな。
However, one thing I will add to that is if you're performing like really well and above performance, the company most likely not drop you. They're gonna look to transfer you to like a different area. They need you the most. So it's like reallocating the resources. In this case, the resources are the engineer.
じゃあ続いてなんですけど、ソフトエンジニアの、キャリア構築のために意識しとくべきこととか、こういうことにフォーカスするとうまくキャリア詰めるよみたいなってあったりします。
First of all, it's focus on your foundation because I mean that's gonna carry you all the way until the end through the whole career. So definitely focus on your fundamentals and having those with a good foundation and good fundamentals. What's gonna happen is you're gonna be able to onboard and like switch to different things quite at ease, right? It doesn't matter like if you're doing Git and this other company uses Mercurial, I have no problem switching from Git to Mercurial, right? Because again, the concepts are the same, like the version control concepts are generally the same. Or for example, if you're going from GitHub Actions to do your own deployment scripts, and then you go on to a different company that uses their own CI/CD like infrastructure, it's the same thing, right? It's the same fundamentals, except in a different context. When you join different companies, probably one of the most important things they expect of you is to be able to onboard and join their code base. Each company's again is closed source, so the only way you're gonna actually understand what the company does is by actually joining the company. That information is nowhere else but inside internally. So if you don't have those fundamentals, then it's gonna be really hard to switch around. And not to mention that this is another thing, but this field is very heavy on changing technology. Technology is constantly changing, but the concepts hardly ever change. The stuff, well, for computer science too, this is stuff that's been invented, like we had this stuff since like the 60s, 70s, and so on. Except the way technology improves is that there's a new tech because previous tech was used, and then this new tech is going to prove you to use tech, and now we have something new, right? To fix the previous problems. And it's kind of like a loop where now this new tech provides this new solution, but it also has these problems. Let's create these new things to solve this new problem. Emerging tech, it's a constant thing you will struggle. Therefore, you need to be ready. Not necessarily, hey, you need to constantly be learning new things and constantly joining new tech. It's more like you need to be ready when the time comes to learn a new tech, and you need to be comfortable.
逆に言うと基礎さえあれば、例えば AWS から GCP とかすぐに移れるしっていうなんか同じようなコンセプトのものを理解しておけば、全然その表面上のサービスの使い方が変わっても全然対応できるしっていうことですね。なので基礎を大切にしつつ、新しい技術をキャッチアップするために常にアンテナを張っとけと。そんな感じでキャリア積んでいくと、後々ジェフェリーさんみたいにメタに入れると。
To talk on talk, some of the stuff I do for recursion, or let's just say at a startup versus Meta, at its core, it's very simple. It's just different context.
ありがとうございます。最後に今日いろいろ聞いたんで、動画の感想などあれば最後にいただきたいんですけど、何かあったりしますか？
So again, I mean, this is for the Japanese target audience. So again, there's many things I recommend. Focus on your fundamentals. From there, software engineer is such a fun career. You can go into many different types of paths. And again, you can move your career up. You can go down. You can say, hey, maybe I don't like this tech stack so much. Let me move to this other one I might enjoy more. As a career in itself, there's a lot of room to switch around as long as you build a good enough foundation, and on top of that, build a good enough experience. And from there, again, you can just move forward or backwards, left and right. You can go to many different places.
ありがとうございます。いや、もうほんま今日いろいろ長い間ありがとうございました。非常に楽しい撮影できてよかったです。
こちらこそありがとうございます。
ありがとうございました。